another takeaway point, I think, is to recognize when the need to defend yourself arises.
Mm-hmm.
Only the ego needs defending. Only the ego wants to defend.
Mm.
If you feel really, and again, we're talking about functional relationships here. We should make that clear. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm not talking about physical abuse or severe emotional abuse or violence. We're talking about difficult but functional relationships. That need to defend one's self is the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just know, like, if you can look out there and go, okay, well, where's the threat? What am I defending myself from? Well, if it's a gun or a knife or a fist, right, that's an appropriate sort of need, right? If the need to defend oneself is against the story of your relationship history and who said what and who did what, or who was right or wrong, or defend yourself against feeling shamed, or defend yourself against feeling blamed. These are not emergent sort of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so in those moments, recognizing that internal elevation that you get and that need to defend, that's what ego feels like.
Right. Which is when it's important to recognize in the moment, I feel super defensive right now.
Yes.
I am not going to be clear.
Right.
No matter what, I'm not going to come across in the way that I want to. That's from my heart. Yep. It's all just my, depending on how you look at it, past trauma, showing up, or karma unfolding, or whatever.
Right. Lots of ways of viewing it. Yeah.
Right.
But it can't be stated strongly enough that that's true even when you are 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Even if your partner is really misinformed or just really hyper emotional and unconscious and saying things that are just not rational and don't make sense, and the whole thing had been recorded on video and you're going to be able to go back and replay the video and prove your point, right? Everybody's had one of those fantasies, right? God knows I did, right? Like, oh, I wish that the video had been recording so I could rewind it and say, look and see. Even if you could do that and you're 100% vindicated by the data, it is still incorrect and unhealthy and unproductive to defend yourself in those situations, because it means you have stepped into the ego instead of stayed in the self and in love and compassion. So I can't think of any specific examples. I think the one thing, well, not the one thing, make it sound like you do one thing right and everything else is a disaster. One of the many things that you do exceptionally well in relationship, but something that has always really stood out to me is that when you're in your moments, you do not aim them at me. I don't know that I've ever had an experience of you doing that. I know I cannot say the same for myself. When I have moments that come up, I'm much more inclined, my unconsciousness, to look for someone or something to blame. And you or the dogs tend to be pretty convenient, right? but in those rare moments when I've sort of lost myself in unconsciousness to that extent, and it might even be usually subtly, but in some way sort of directed at you, you never respond at that level. And you're able to, just like I am, to, when you're elevated and I can remain here and sort of surrendered, you do the same. But it's a good example of, even when I might subtly be trying to sort of point something at you, you're sort of the energetic and emotional Bruce Lee, where you just sort of slip, be like water. you're like water, and you just, and it just sort of moves right by you, and there's zero reactivity from an ego perspective. You're just not invested in being right. You just sort of let me have my moment. But again, part of why we can do that in our relationship so readily is the knowing and the trust that we've built between each other,
Mm.
that even when I'm lost in that, I'm not invested in winning an argument or being right or having my way. And that
Mhm.
as soon as that has sort of passed, and I come back into my conscious self, I can stand and look at that and go, okay, that was a hot mess. I've got some things to look at, right? And any previous sense of wanting to kind of point that and direct it at you will just totally dissolve. So there's trust, there's a mutual trust that the other person is going to look at their stuff and
Yeah.
take full responsibility for their experience.